Hi, good evening. Very warm welcome and thank you for joining us for tonight's East Kilbride live election hustings event. Very soon the people of Scotland will be heading to the ballot box in what have been described as many as the most important elections since the Parliament reconvened in 1999. This is mainly because the people of Scotland stand at a crossroads. We're now facing a reality where the Brexit horror stories are now becoming a Brexit reality for many businesses and people across the country. With a situation where we've been removed from Europe against the wishes of the people of Scotland, but find ourselves almost powerless to address the locomotive that's heading down the tracks towards us. But with various other issues that's affecting the country, i.e. things like pandemic, getting ourselves a recovery back on that plan, we want to make sure that positions of Scotland's power are within the hands of the people that live and work here towards making sure that the recovery is best for the people of Scotland and not something that's taken out of our hands to control. So the upcoming election in May will be, as I say, the most important in recent history for people across Scotland to really get their voice held and make sure that the path that we take in the future is one that suits us all. So we're very proud to invite you across tonight for East Kilbride's live hustings event. And we are very fortunate to have the top listed candidates for the three main pro-independence parties who will be sitting in the central region across Scotland in May. First up, we have Tasmina, Ahmed-Sheikh, who needs no introduction, who will also be representing the Alba party. Second, we have Jillian Mackay, who will be standing for the Green Party. And Dinesh Ashraf, who some of you may know from the East Kilbride area already, who will be standing and representing the SNP. So the format of the evening will be that we'll be putting questions towards each of our candidates in which they'll have the opportunity to address the questions that are coming in from our panel. So you can also, by watching the show, get your questions into the panel by using the hashtag EKLX, and you can use that via any of the social media platforms or even YouTube that you might be watching on tonight. So without any further ado, we'll pass you over to the first speaker of the night from Alba Party. It's Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul, and thank you to East Kilbride for the invitation. It's always great to do Yes events, and I think I want to start by paying tribute to the work of the Yes movement, who've kept the flame burning since the 2014 referendum. And that goes for Independence Live and all of the Yes organisations that exist, and all under one banner, all continuing to strive for our nation's noble cause of independence. It's also a pleasure to be on here with Gillian and Danish. I'm looking forward to a lovely evening of conversation. So my name is Tasmina. As you said, I've been in the independence cause for some 20 years now, and it's a real pleasure to be involved in a campaign for our nation's independence. Some of you may know in 2013 I stood for the European Parliament, and then again in 2014 I was on the board of Yes Scotland in the campaign for Scotland's independence. And if I was to describe Alba as one thing, it would be a recreation of that summer of 2014, where the imperative for independence was felt so strongly by so many, where it morphed from not just being the campaign of the dominant political party, which remains the dominant political party in Scotland, the SNP, it morphed from that being a much greater movement. And that's what brought strength to the cause of Yes. All of the different split off groups, all from different parts of Scotland with different interests, who were able to persuade people of like minds from like areas and like thinking as to why Yes was the way forward. So it's a recreation, I suppose, of that understanding, most importantly, why now is indeed the most important election in Scotland, and certainly for the Scottish people and the independence movement. In 2015, I was elected to the Westminster Parliament as a Member of Parliament for Ochil and South Perthshire. I was the first woman of colour to be elected to any parliament, Scottish, Westminster or European, in 2015. But in my time at Westminster, which was short-lived in 2 years, but for anyone at Westminster, it should be no longer than it needs to be, I learned an awful lot about how Scotland and nationalist politics are regarded in that chamber. The chamber that's supposed to be the mother of all parliaments, the chamber that's supposed to demonstrate respect across the world, listening to other people's arguments. But, you know, like my colleagues in the SNP, we were ridiculed, shouted at, noises made at, the very famous Nicholas Soames incident, where you'll be aware that I was giving a speech. And in fact, I was challenging Boris Johnson's foreign policy, something that should be challenged every day of the week, in my view. And Nicholas Soames whiffed at me, barked in the chamber, and obviously had to make a complaint. And, you know, when it came down to it, he said he was sorry if I was offended. But that's just a small insight into how we're treated. So the point is, the Westminster Parliament isn't the place for the cause of an independent Scotland. It's a means for a short period of time as to demanding the route to getting there. But our aim and ambition has got to be to ensure that our devolved Parliament, which has done a lot of great work over the past 20 odd years, becomes an independent Parliament, the first independent Parliament for Scotland. And I've been a member of the SNP for 21 years, but left the SNP recently to join the Alba party for a number of reasons. The primary one being that independence is now essential. It's not something that can be put on the back burner. And this idea that Scotland can only do one thing at one time simply to fight. Yes, there's an economic recovery that has to be put in place. I've lost 3 members of my family to this pandemic. It's hurt me home and it's hurt me hard. But that can only be tackled. That can only be tackled properly and only be achieved in an independent Scotland. Independence has to be the priority, otherwise recovery. We'll be going to Westminster to be asking them to give us certain things to enable us to do certain things. That time must come to an end. We need to push for independence now. I'm not saying, therefore, that we can have a referendum at some point in the next Parliament. We say no. We should be pushing for that now. And not even an independence referendum or a Section 30 order was something that was appropriate at that period in time when David Cameron was prepared after negotiation to grant it. It's not the only means to independence, nor should it be. Circumstances have changed. We're now out of the European Union against our will. We're now in a situation where we have to drive Scotland forward, but we don't have the powers to do so. Therefore, Alba is standing 30 candidates in this election, 18 men, 32 I should say, sorry, 18 men, women and 14 men across Scotland with a manifesto, a strong manifesto to shake it up, to use the terminology we've been using since yesterday, across a variety of topics, no doubt some of which we will discuss today. But certainly in terms of, yes, this East Kilbride and the independence movement, the imperative for Alba is to push independence forward. There's been multiple mandates and little action. That won't do, because those who are suffering the poverty and inequality that they're now left with as a result of where Scotland now finds herself cannot wait any longer. In 2014, like many of my colleagues here tonight, no doubt, we were up and down the country speaking to village halls and town halls packed full of people who had hope for change in 2014. And we looked upon their faces. And I remember so many of those faces on that night of the 18th of September going into the 19th when we didn't win, but we got so close. They've had that hope for 5 years now, more than 5 years, 7 years now. Now is the time to deliver on that hope. We cannot wait any longer. And we certainly cannot wait for Boris Johnson and his cronies to decide when it's right for Scotland to take that decision. I'm a Scot, we're all fellow Scots here. It's time to take our future into our own hands. It's time to end empty words, multiple mandates and no action. It's time to deliver for Scotland. And that is what the Alba Party intends to do, because with independence, we can do anything and everything our peoples need in Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you, Tasmina. A great warm start on there. And next up on the list for candidates representing the SNP is Dinesh Ashraf.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks to yes, East Kilbride and East Kilbride at large for having me along. It doesn't seem that long from the constituency campaign when I met with many of you. So for those of us that haven't been introduced, my name is Dinesh Ashraf. I am the lead candidate for the SNP on the Central Scotland regional list. So a little background about me. I spent 10 years in the charity sector, raising funds here for children's charities abroad. So that's for limb replacement, that's for former war zones, that's for one-to-one sponsorship for kids and their education, getting them vocational education so they could provide in countries abroad. Following the independence referendum, which I was for, but I thought we had it in the bag at the time, I realised, you know what, I need to apply my skill set here and to politics and to Scotland itself. So a little bit of a change in lane, got involved more at the branch and was asked to stand as a councillor in the 2017 elections for North Lanarkshire Council, where I've been working hard to change things there. I've managed to institute with my maiden speech mandatory diversity training for all the councillors. I ousted a BNP councillor that was there. I then brought forward, along with another councillor and the backing of the SNP group at North Lanarkshire, the first anti-racist educational policy, as far as I'm aware, anywhere in the UK, but definitely anywhere in Scotland, showing the brutalities of the British Empire and teaching it, having it taught with warts and all, as opposed to the sort of version of history we get taught at the minute. Coming along to independence, look, I think what we need to look at here is independence is our first and foremost priority. It's why many of us got into politics. It's why I'm here. It's why other politicians are here, and it's why many political parties are in existence in the first place here. Because Scotland isn't being heard. It's not being heard at Westminster, as Tasmina just mentioned, and it's not being heard within the wider context of the world, because we don't have our own unique voice that's coming through the United Kingdom. You know, having a handful of MPs at Westminster isn't cutting the mustard anymore. And up here in Scotland, with the levers that we have, the current status quo is not an option. It is being actively dismantled, actively taken apart by Boris Johnson and his band of bandits, frankly, and is being taken apart with this type of devolution settlement that we have at the minute is no longer an option for us. This will not be here in a few years' time. So the fight has really been put to us, and nowhere is that more imminent, more pertinent, more felt palpably within the governing party, because we are the party that's actually delivering for Scotland every single day. We have taken action on tuition fees, we've taken action on freezing the council tax, action on poverty and being the game-changing £10 a week that we've brought in, which will double if re-elected. We've had action on the abhorrent bedroom tax. These are the things that we have already delivered on. We've delivered on an independence referendum. And then when we didn't get it, we didn't rest on our laurels. We continued forward and said, we're going to continue this excellent record of governance and show those that don't yet understand that the SNP will fight for each and every Scot, whether they voted yes or whether they voted no. We'll continue to fight for them in Scotland because they're Scots, and the SNP will fight for every single vote, every single time. I'm here in Cumbernauld, and today I was campaigning for Jamie Hepburn. We have a majority at the last election of around 10,000. And we're still out chapping doors, delivering the leaflets out in the sun, whilst we're fasting, whilst it's raining, because we don't take it for granted. We won't make the mistakes that Labour made, that took Scotland for granted. The point is this, that we had a majority and we were able to bring forward a referendum. Now, it rolls off the tongue to say multiple mandates and little action. Action is in governance, not only in rhetoric. It's in having been in power, having done something for the people that you represent. And the SNP have consistently shown that. And I think that the vast majority of people that look to the SNP will know that our policies have worked for them, for everyone in Scotland. And to continue that into government, into this next election, means that we will then deliver for another referendum. The First Minister's already said that. But we are the government of the day. So we do also need to speak on other topics. We don't have the luxury of just saying independence all day long, although that is the aim, that is the reason why we govern the way we do. That is why we hold the trust of the people of Scotland, is for independence. And that is our priority in this Parliament, to bring about another referendum and to also repair the country from the incredible scenes that we've seen over the last couple of years for the pandemic. We're coming into 2 years now. So that's what I have to say at the moment. And I hope to have your votes on the list. And I'm looking forward to a great discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Dinesh, very much. And of course, last but not least, representing the Scottish Greens is Jillian Mackay.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you for the invitation to speak this evening. So I'm Jillian Mackay and I'm the Scottish Greens lead candidate for Central Scotland. I was born in Falkirk, brought up in Grangemouth and now live in Falkirk. I'm a marine biologist by trade, and for the last 5 years I've worked at Holyrood. And in my very limited spare time, I'm a charity fundraiser with a Star Wars costuming group. I have Meniere's disease, which is a hearing-related disability that also causes tinnitus and vertigo, so disabled rights are very much at the heart of my campaigning. I came into politics largely by accident. At university, I was very interested in how public policy influenced, or in some cases hindered, local attitudes towards certain issues. In the case of my MSc project, this was attitudes towards marine protected areas comparing the Western Isles and the Central Belt. Master's courses generally graduate in October, and unfortunately, no one takes on marine biology graduates for projects over the winter in Scotland. On a bit of a whim, I applied for the Inclusion Scotland internships for disabled graduates to get a feel for how policy is made and how MSPs interact with that process. I was placed with the then Green MSPs, and the rest, as they say, is history. Since then, I've been co-convener of the Scottish Young Greens, and I'm currently co-convener of the Falkirk branch. Our main message for this election is vote like our future depends on it. We've 9 years to save the planet, and almost all the change we need has to happen within this parliamentary term. There's never been a more important election in terms of the climate crisis. Despite being a relatively small party, the Scottish Green MSPs punched well above their weight last session. During that time, we've secured free school meals for all primary school children, including through the holidays for low-income households, regular COVID testing for care workers, NHS staff and teachers, secured £500 million for local services like schools, swimming pools and libraries, free bus travel for under 22s from this summer, allowing young people to travel to work, school and college for free, opening up many opportunities for them. A pay rise for public sector workers worth £100 million, and so many other things that I could be here all night. With many more MSPs, we would have the ability to get even more things done. This is a very whistle-stop tour of our manifesto, and I would encourage you all to read it if you haven't already. On the environment, as I said earlier, this is a very environment-focused election. We have to do industry differently to ensure that we both preserve the planet and preserve jobs and livelihoods for the future. We need to protect our green spaces and not open them up to developers. We propose a green recovery investment plan that would slash emissions and create over 100,000 jobs, including investing £450 million in renewables, a new deal for onshore wind, and the development for a world-leading tidal sector. We want to ban fox hunting for good. The current ban has huge loopholes, and closing these are essential. Divest public sector pensions from oil and gas. Local authorities have lost millions of pounds in assets by investing in oil and gas. If we're serious about the climate crisis, we need to move away from investing in these destructive industries that are polluting the planet. But we also need to ensure a just transition for workers in the oil and gas sector. They're among the most highly skilled workers in Scotland, and transferring these skills to clean and green industries is a must. On education, we've committed to hiring over 5,000 new teachers. Currently, our teachers are overworked and under-resourced. Teachers need time for CPD and to plan lessons that engage young people. Without this time to train, learn and plan, we cannot expect teachers to be able to deliver the engaging lessons our young people need. Teachers have worked tirelessly through the pandemic, often changing plans at the drop of a hat to accommodate new regulations and changes. We want children to start formal schooling at the age of 7 and use early primary years to learn through play. This wouldn't affect childcare, as this is just a change of focus in the early years of primary school, not a scrapping of it. My colleague Ross Greer managed to get changes brought into the way PSE is taught to ensure that this is pupil-led. That way young people can direct their learning and request experts on the topics that they want to know more about. We've also committed to embedding climate education and education about Scotland's past into the curriculum. Mental health should be at the heart of Scotland's healthcare systems, with 10% of frontline health spend to mental health, an investment in CAMHS, CBT and social prescribing, and a mental health worker in every GP practice. Remobilising the NHS post-pandemic, getting back to regular screening and ensuring that missed appointments are made up for is also high on our priority list. We need to end the war on drugs and shift to a public health approach, including the creation of safe consumption facilities and crisis centres. Treating the underlying trauma that is often at the heart of addiction is vital and strongly links to our policies on mental health. On transport, our Rail for All policy would bring £22 billion of investment over 20 years, creating 17,000 jobs and building a publicly owned and carbon neutral rail network in Scotland. Integrated journeys with other local public transport and a focus on routes that serve their communities, not the operators, are also key. Ending road expansion like the Stewartfield Way project is key to keeping emissions down. Many studies show that the more road capacity you build, the more cars will use that road capacity. We propose a new deal for renters, making the winter eviction bans permanent, strengthening landlord regulation, and introduce rent controls to ensure no more than 25% of household income is spent on rent. East Kilbride has a great legacy as a new town, but the loss of council housing through right to buy means that we now have a huge waiting list and a long list of housing repairs. On a positive note, this in itself has the potential to create local jobs as we retrofit old houses as well as repair them. And of course, but by no means least, independence. This election has a very different focus to independence based on the last one. This is no longer about who supports or does not support independence or who can out-independence each other. It's about the Scotland we want to see after independence. All Green MSPs will campaign and vote for a referendum within the next parliamentary term and under the terms of the Referendums Act 2020. We will continue to build the green vision for independence, which will be critical both to winning the next referendum and to laying the groundwork for an independent nation which is genuinely progressive, compassionate, and built on the principles of radical democracy, equality, and respect for the planet. Thank you for listening to that very quick run round our manifesto, and I look forward to all of your questions.
Thanks, Gillian. Thanks very much for that. And of course, that's all of our speakers had their opening blurb of the evening. So it's now over to the most important part where we put your questions across to each of the candidates that are standing. So we'll get right at it. So the first question that's come in is from Scotty0709, and it's very topical. With the negative impact of Brexit impacting Scottish businesses right now, what is the quickest way for us to regain access into the European single market? And if you don't mind, Dinesh, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Bo, and thanks, Scott, for the question. As you know, we've been dragged from the European Union, and therefore the quickest route back would be to hold a referendum and be declared independent and reapply back. Now, we have already set, the SNP has set the foundations for those relationships already before MEPs left the European Parliament, and therefore we have those connections of goodwill to go back. And we see ourselves as much more closely European than the English ever did. And we know that and feel that in this room. So the quickest way back is to continue our great governance as the SNP and get towards that independence referendum as quickly as possible and then apply to get back. So that's what I would propose. And with regards to businesses, the Scottish Government has given 100% rates relief over the next year to help with COVID as well. So that's something that's going to help us get back onto our feet.
Perfect. Thank you, Dinesh. And the same question next is for Gillian.
So unsurprisingly, I'm not gonna disagree with Danish's answer there. Independence is the best way back into the single market. We have, as Greens, we have very strong links with the European Parliament as well. In the European Parliament, the SNP actually sit with us, as we're the bigger part of that group in the European Parliament. So it would be nice to get everybody back in there and back to the table to enjoy the benefits we had previously. I mean, even the Tories themselves have admitted that Brexit's a disaster. They can't tell us when, if ever, anyone will benefit from the dragging out of this, other than clearly some of the Tories' pals. But yeah, independence is the way back in, and yeah, the sooner we get there, the better.
Thanks, Gillian. And again, the same question to Tasmina.
Well, there's not going to be much disagreement on the point of the question. However, I just want to inject a bit of realism into the debate here. In 2019, the SNP campaigned on a Stop Brexit slogan in that general election, and were unable to stop Brexit because in Westminster we don't have the power or authority to do so. And the SNP were unable to deliver on that pledge that that's what they would do. Where we currently stand is businesses are suffering terribly, from fishing industry to farming, right across the board. So what can be done quickly? Yes, the only way is to gain independence as quickly as possible. But no one's yet answered the question as to how that is to be done. If we're going by what's been said already, we'll be waiting for a Section 30 order to be granted. When is that going to happen? What we're saying in Alba is we can't allow others to determine the course of our future. We're saying we must be more proactive than that. So it's not just about waiting for Section 30 orders, it's about diplomatic initiatives. It's about, from day one, the plan of the Alba Party is to lay down a motion in Parliament 3 weeks from now, stating that we must immediately start negotiations on independence with a Conservative government at Westminster. Because if we elect a majority, a supermajority, which is what Alba is proposing, of independents supporting MSPs, the game changes completely. It's currently being run as the SNP government versus the Tory government. When you change and recast that argument and make it not just one government pitted against another, but a whole parliament, a supermajority of MSPs supporting independence, representing the people of Scotland against Boris Johnson, it changes fundamentally. It becomes impossible to resist what is actually our right, which is to seek our own self-determination. And indeed, I think myself that if we elect a supermajority of MSPs, let me give you an example. If half of the people who voted SNP on the list in 2016, let me be very clear, the Alba Party's view policy is we should absolutely vote SNP in all constituencies across Scotland on the constituency ballot. We're only asking for people's list votes. And the reason we're asking for people's list votes is that in this region alone, in 2016, 129,000 votes were cast for the SNP on the list, and we elected 0 MSPs. So these are wasted votes. I'm asking people to make their vote work, because if half those people vote for Alba, we'll have 20 Alba MSPs in that parliament, and we'll have approximately 90 out of 129 pro-independence MSPs fighting not just to get a referendum, but for independence itself. Because if your manifesto states it's a mandate for independence, that is what we should be negotiating on day one. And beyond that, our own view and in our manifesto is that we need to get ourselves back into the European Economic Area as soon as possible. Now, we all know we're the best will in the world. And of course, the aim, certainly for myself personally, is to get back into the European Union. But we can use EFTA and membership of the EEA as a staging post into that, because our businesses cannot afford to wait. Our people cannot afford to wait. And that's the Alba proposal in the upcoming elections.
Thanks, Tasmina. And ironically takes us on to the next question, but you won't be surprised to hear has an independence flavour about it. So the question came in from John Beattie, and this is: several mandates have been had from the Scottish Government for various reasons and dates and have been moved out, etc. The latest date, which has been suggested by Angus Robertson, is actually 2026. This date by many in the Yes movement is indeed too late. On this basis, can you categorically confirm your single focus and determination will be on achieving independence, and what timescales do you envisage this becoming a reality? Gillian, we can start with you, please.
As a group of MSPs, we are committed to bringing forward an independence referendum next session. So that would be before 2026. I think any party that says to you their sole focus is independence is lying, or is vastly got their eye off the day job. The day job of Holyrood, as well as pushing for independence, has to be to continue to have a country that runs properly. If you take your eye off of health, education, social security, all these other things that we've taken 21 years to work on in a parliament, then that's a dereliction of duty, essentially. You have to be able to do the day job and push for the wider view all in a oneer. On Tasmina's point of SNP voters shifting over to Alba, we've been in Parliament since 1999. We missed out on a seat by 1,800 votes last time round. That's where independent supporters who are looking for a second vote should vote Green. We are close to being in Holyrood in central Scotland. We have progressive policies that will bring forward a really compassionate, socially just, environmentally respectful independent Scotland, and that's what our focus should be, as well as keeping an eye on the day job, pushing for independence.
Thanks, Gillian. And of course, Tasmina.
Thank you, and thanks, John, for the question. Well, first of all, let me clarify, nobody's suggesting, in case Gillian was directing that at me, that our sole focus is independence. What I'm saying is, independence is a means to be able to rectify all that needs to be done in Scotland, to make it the social democratic country that eradicates poverty and inequality. We will never be able to do that as a devolved nation. That's simply not good enough. We have to strive for independence because that gives us the power to do everything that we need to do. Devolution is a means to an end, but it's not the end in and of itself. And our manifesto is full of policies across a wide range of different topics, including education, health, poverty, inequality, climate change, etc. But the question asked quite rightly, there's been multiple mandates and what's happened? And the answer is nothing. The question is, would this just be another mandate for the other party? A majority in 2016, but they were part of an arrangement, an agreement. I mean, Gillian obviously was an independent supporting Green candidate. We've had Greens and SNP in Parliament since 2016. There's been no referendum delivered. We're no further forward in our quest for a referendum. There's been no action in that respect. There's been calls, multiple calls over that period of time. Now is the time, now it's going to happen, multiple front pages, but it hasn't happened. For a variety of reasons, it hasn't happened. It's for others to defend why that hasn't happened. But the point is, it requires to happen now. So what are the other parties offering that's going to change the status quo? The status quo is, you had a mandate. You had a mandate in 2016, but it hasn't been acted upon. What's going to happen now in 2021 to make a difference? What I've suggested is that by bringing more independent supporting MSPs into the Scottish Parliament, with a focus on independence and all of the important policies that we need in an independent Scotland, we can start making that happen. Our manifesto is full of ideas about how we can start some of the work now. What are we waiting for? Let's draft our written constitution. Let's set up commissions to look at currency. Let's talk about what the future should look like. None of these things are prevented. None of these things have happened. Because if it's a view, not necessarily my view, that we have to proceed by a Section 30 order and have a referendum, surely we should be prepared to fight that referendum. Where are the preparations? What's Scotland going to look like? What are we going to sell to the people? So what Alba is offering is to inject some realism, shake up what's going on in there, move from when we've gone in all of the good years and all of the good work that's gone on in government. I'm not detracting from that at all. The Scottish Parliament is a success and the SNP government has been a success in the Scottish Parliament. But that is not enough. We need to recast the debate, recast the arguments, not taking our eye off the ball on the fundamental day job that has to be done. Gillian's absolutely right. But we can't just do one job at once because Scotland and our people require us to be able to do more than that and deliver for them on independence. And we hope to inject what's necessary to push people along a wee bit to make sure we achieve everything that we need to do as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Tasmina. And Danish, the same question to you.
And thanks for the question. So yeah, no, look, independence has come as soon as feasibly possible. As been mentioned already with regards to poverty, with regards to all the levers of government that we don't have in Scotland due to not being able to make our own decisions in Scotland for the people of Scotland. But we need to address some of the issues that's being brought up here, and the sort of fallacy of a supermajority, of the sort of fallacy that we don't have enough independent MSPs in the government, in the Scottish Parliament already. There is a independence majority at the minute, and a supermajority holds no legislative extra powers that we would have without having it. Now, the situation is this: we had the majority in the SNP, and that is the currency within which Westminster will take into account what Scotland is saying. At the minute that we are in part, so we previously had a majority, and then we lost that due to pop-up parties and to other parties saying, well, if you give the list vote to the Greens, if you give the list vote to someone else, they'll hurry things along. The Greens got a 6.6% list vote across the board at the last elections. To say somehow a new party, any new party, is going to get around 50% of the SNP's vote on the list is toying with fantasy. It's really not realistic. There's polls today showing new parties polling around the 1% mark, and even the ones that are polling higher than that, still not getting any MSPs because they're not breaching the 5% mark that they need to breach, which the Greens have been doing for some time, and that's an established party who is known by every voter in the country, whether they vote Green or not. They're known by them. Now, so this is where we stand. So speaking of wasted votes or making your votes work for you, the only way to do that is to ensure that the SNP MSPs get there, because that is the real deal independence party that will deliver for Scotland, has been delivering for Scotland. And, you know, we can shake heads and things, but the government speaks for itself. And the record of government is what the people of Scotland, who are discerning voters, will decide upon, who is the quality, credible and trustworthy party to take us into the next step, into independence, into an independence referendum and beyond. And so absolutely independence is to come as soon as possible, but we are already convinced. We're preaching to the choir here. There is a whole host of people who are not yet convinced, somehow incredibly not yet convinced. And the way we do that is by doing the day job, governing for Scotland and showing them that look, Westminster does not govern for you, they govern for themselves and the rich elite and their friends. We see that with the PPE contracts. We see that with Boris Johnson not even knowing his own counterpart in Scotland, calling him Murray Douglas or something. You know, you didn't even know because to him it's a branch. It's like the disdain in which they treated the colonies before. That's how it looks. You know, for a person of Asian heritage, that's how it looks. So yeah, absolute independence needs to come around here and now and very quickly so that we can move forward and create a Scotland that's fit for the people of Scotland.
Thanks, Dinesh. I was conscious, Tasmina, you had your hand up. Were you wanting to come in on a point there?
I did a couple of points. You see, a big mistake that independent supporting political parties will make is if they think the independence cause is their sole preserve. It is not the sole preserve of the SNP. The SNP is a necessary and very important and highly respected element of. It's about the whole independence movement. It's about the Greens. It's about those who've been marching since 2014 when political parties have been inactive. It's their movement. It's about all the yes groups that still exist. It's about yes, East Kilbride. We don't just get independence because the SNP decide they're the only ones that can deliver it. So we should be real and respectful of all of those who have something positive to contribute to the cause. Secondly, people should be aware of the panel-based poll just of a couple of days ago where people were asked about other independent supporting parties and if it was feasible or all right for them to be involved. A question that shouldn't need to be asked. I should say, I think it's quite frankly abhorrent that we're advocating an independent Scotland that embraces everybody, but at the same time, we think we can exclude new political parties. Why? What kind of Scotland is that we're trying to create? In other modern European democracies, there is a multitude of parties fighting on list elections. So why not Alba? Why can't we join in? And in the poll, in fact, of all the people polled, 75%, including unionists, believed it was perfectly feasible for another party to present themselves forward for election on the list, and indeed even the constituencies, no doubt, but we're fighting on the list. And of great importance, and for Danish's information, 80% of SNP voters, 88% agreed that the Alba party should absolutely have the right to stand in this election. Now, I'm not denying anyone else the opportunity to stand. I'm not suggesting they shouldn't be there, and I'm not suggesting they don't have anything to contribute to the cause. I'm saying that there is space for all of us, and the Scotland I want to be part of, the Scotland I want to embrace, embraces everybody, regardless of where they might have come from, because everyone has something to offer. So let's broaden the debate. Let's broaden our parliament. If we haven't delivered, which we haven't, on the mandates of the past, let's see what we can do in 2021 to make the difference that is necessary. Because it's not just about the SNP and the Tories. It's about the people of Scotland. And I hope on May the 6th, the people of Scotland will vote to show Boris Johnson. It's not about one political party. It's about the people. And you can't fight against the people. The people will win.
Thanks, Tasmina. And Dinesh, you had your hand up. You want to
Yeah,
comment on that briefly?
Just quickly, Paul, and I'll be brief. I didn't want to suggest that they weren't entitled to stand, and I wasn't seeking to exclude anyone. Neither did I say that, so I don't know which part of what I said Tasmina was responding to there. What I was suggesting and putting forward in the debate in a respectful way was that leading experts on elections in Scotland, leading professors, one of which Professor John Curtis actually says that the Scottish voter actually does not easily trust those parties that come up on the list. And historically speaking, it's been the case. The data shows that. I've mentioned the Greens voting numbers, 6.6% after being an established and long-standing party. So it's just factually stating that to say that we'll get 50% or seek to get involved at the 50% level of the SNP's vote on the first time standing on the list is probably really not that realistic. And to suggest that and to offer that up to people who are trying to decide on their votes could be seen by others to be a little bit misleading, but I'm certainly not seeking to exclude anyone. It's a democratic right. I'm standing here as a Democrat, as a current elected member of a chamber, so as a Democrat, I'm not looking to exclude anyone, but I was just suggesting and putting forward the facts as I see them and the facts that have been put forward by experts in the field.
Thanks, Dinesh. And Gillian, are you want to come in on that at all? In case you're still, I'm not sure if you're still awake, you just might want to come in and add a bit to that.
I'm here. I think what is essential is sort of taking apart the two sides of the argument that Tasmina just made about people being excluded. There are two things that we have to look at here. One is the election, where we are essentially standing against each other to try and get a seat in Holyrood. And the other thing is the Yes movement. The Yes movement should absolutely be the broadest church possible, because as Danish said, we have plenty of no voters who we need to bring on side. We need to show that the Yes movement is almost a proxy for what we want an independent Scotland to be. We want to show it's progressive and one and moving forward together, despite the fact we have different arguments about various individual policy points, that the end goal is a progressive, inclusive, wonderful Scotland that is independent. So I think sort of dividing out those two issues of yes needs to be a broad church, but this is an election and we're going to criticise each other over stances, policies and whatever else, and that's a legitimate interrogation of each other.
Thanks, Gillian, for that. So moving on to a slightly different topic. This question, we actually had a number of questions about this particular area, so we kind of boiled it down into one. So this came from Julie from Twitter. The SNP recently released their 2021 manifesto with a commitment to reforming the GRA whilst ensuring it will not affect the rights of protecting women, in which they currently enjoy under the Equality Act 2010. With this in mind, a high number of women rights groups have voiced their concerns over reforms such as removing single-sex spaces, etc., in which a lot of them have viewed that they believe this to be attacking the current rights that women enjoy in Scotland. What would you be your stance from your party in order you can give reassurance that any changes that will go through will also be ensuring safeguarding women's rights in Scotland going forward? We'll start off with Danish, please.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks to the audience for the question. Look, I think we all want to live in a fairer, more prosperous Scotland. We want to live in a Scotland where everyone is able to be who they are, and this has not been an easy path to bring about the trans rights into legislation, but it's one I think in 2021 we need to look at, and it's something that the party is looking to bring about in I feel the need to bring about in a holistic and cohesive way, in taking everyone along with us, and that means speaking to women's groups, that means speaking to those that are not convinced and those that are concerned about how this might look for their own rights. And I think it's only right that all of those voices are heard. It is government's job to bring the people of Scotland behind the government and have a consensus when we move forward, not to drag people along. So I feel that the conversation has become quite fraught on both sides, and I think that there's a lot of healing to be done as we move forward. I don't envy government to see what that solution looks like, but I have faith in the integrity, in the intelligence, and the insight of the institutions of this country to find the solution and to lead us there, or whatever that looks like down the line.
Thanks, Dinesh. And Gillian, if you can answer the same question, please.
Yep, so we are committed to delivering reforms to the Gender Recognition Act, including statutory self-declaration, recognising non-binary identities and all genders. For me, intersectional feminism is absolutely at the heart of green politics, and that includes ensuring that trans and non-binary people are recognised and their rights upheld. Trans people wait ridiculously long for appropriate health care and various other things. They're often very marginalised and take an awful lot of abuse for just being exactly who they are. And for me, the GRA is something that is going to be very fraught within Holyrood, but we are fully behind the trans and non-binary community, and it's something that's signed up to by our women's network, and our Rainbow Greens will be publishing their manifesto in not too long a time as well.
Thanks, Gillian. And the same question, Tasmina.
Thanks very much, and thanks to Julie, I think it was, for the question. Well, without a doubt, Alba has the strongest manifesto in protection and preservation of women's sex-based rights in this election campaign. And I was National Women's Convener and Equalities Convener for the SNP for 7 years. And I believe every equality is, and every human right is as important as the other. There's no one right that's more virtuous and more worthy of recognition and respect than any other. But you can't provide rights at the expense of other rights. We have to make space for everybody. Everybody should be safeguarded in the law. And currently, in terms of the Equality Act 2010, all the protected characteristics must indeed be protected. Unfortunately for women, unfortunately for trans people, the debate to date has been absolutely shocking and has let everybody down that's been involved on all sides. People have lost their jobs. A Green MSP had to resign from being a Green MSP because he deigned to express a view or attended an event. No, this is not the kind of Scotland we should be seeking to be. We should be able to have open debate where we can, like we're doing this evening, respectfully disagree with each other and express our points of view without extreme situations arising from that. Unfortunately, there's been an awful lot of heat and very little light. We've suggested in our very strong Women and Equalities policy that very immediately there needs to be a citizens' assembly to discuss this very issue, ensuring that rights are there and afforded to everybody because everybody's entitled to them. But this cannot be, must not be, will not be, should not be at the expense of women's rights. I have a right as a woman to single-sex spaces. I've got a right not to be examined by a man. I've got a right not to share a ward with a man.
Just checking there. I think we've lost Tasmina for a second there. We'll wait till she comes back on. Gillian, Dinesh, any of you want to come on the points that Tasmina had raised so far? No? Okay. We'll give Tasmina a few seconds there because we appear to have lost her. We'll move on to the next question. The next question that we've got coming in is with regards to the National Care Services. So Mark Sands has sent in the question saying, what do the candidates think of a National Care Service and what should it look like? And Gillian, we can start off with you, please.
This is one of the policies that's sort of really close to my heart for the next Holyrood session. My grandpa received amazing care over the last 3 years of his life. And the current model within local authorities that tenders care out to private companies is no longer fit for purpose. It's bursting at the seams. It's not providing those who access care with the care level that they need. And that's why we need a national care service. We need that national body, but delivered with local accountability and the self-directed support that people who require care needs. and it's something that we will absolutely support. We will support the input of service users as well as the staff within the social care sector, who have done a phenomenal job through this pandemic and before, and absolutely deserve all the praise and the thanks they've had recently. And my personal thank yous to every single one of them that have been out doing the job in the face of the pandemic, putting themselves and their families at risk, to ensure that people like me didn't have to give up a day job to help care for a relative and let me have that nice familial grandpa granddaughter relationship that we enjoyed so much, rather than having to be his carer. So it's absolutely something we need to do, that we need to pay these people properly and get it done quickly.
Thanks, Gillian. And Dinesh, what do you think a national care service should look like?
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, the National Care Service is a key and headline part of the SNP's manifesto. We'd look, if we're elected, to establish a National Care Service to oversee the delivery of care, improve the standards of care, and to provide better support for unpaid carers who at the minute have a grant that we've upheld. We'd also ensure enhanced pay conditions for the workers themselves, and for a new national wage for carers, ensuring workers' rights are protected in a sector that is abhorrently overworked and often does the work with great compassion, great virtue, and great application of themselves personally, not just professionally. You know, they really have to go above and beyond, and there's a lot of burnout. There's a lot of burnout in the sector, and I think this shows the dignity that we want to give to the workers in this sector, and just lift up this sector that do such vital work in our communities. So that's a key part of our manifesto.
Thanks, Dinesh. And Tasmina, apologies to anyone watching. No conspiracy, but Tasmina dropped off for a while. So if you can answer this question for us first, Tasmina, and we'll get you to finish off your comments, because we've had quite a lot of feedback at people asking to hear their insight, which seems fair enough. So same question to you. What do you think a national care service should look like?
Oh, I heard the majority of what's been said, and I agree wholeheartedly with it. I think the SNP have got a really good policy on that. The only thing I would add is that we shouldn't underestimate, I think Gillian perhaps even mentioned, I just got the end of your comments, forgive me, Gillian, we mustn't underestimate the stress that our care workers have been under during this pandemic at levels unprecedented. And of course, not just in the work that they've done to make people better, but also their own personal circumstances. We have no idea when people are presenting themselves as their carers for us, whether it's they're giving us our JAG, COVID JAG, or if we're in hospital, what might be going on in their own personal lives and what they might be facing. There are huge issues here, and there's a huge mental health element that needs to be addressed also. It mustn't be forgotten in terms of how we address, post-pandemic era. So I'm fully supportive of the policy. All I would say about care homes is we need to build a new generation of care homes, using the skills that we've got and the facilities we've got and the timber that we've got to create homes that are fit for going into the next century. So we must use all of our skills to enable us to do so. So we make sure that we are well prepared, heaven forbid, if anything like that might happen again. But the healthcare workers we owe them absolutely everything. When I was lucky enough to have my JAG a couple of weeks ago, in Glasgow, I was so, it's a really emotional time. I've had it at the same time as Professor Jason Leach, so I knew whatever I was getting, it must be good. So thank you to all the health workers for all that you do, and to helping everyone through the pain and anguish of losing someone, which is what they've also done so amazingly well.
Thanks, Tasmina. And what we'll do is we'll let you just finish off, if you don't mind, where you dropped off. It's the lines, so to speak, are lighting up as a direct result. One part I'll just add to it and give you the opportunity, because I'd come to you first, Tasmina, and I'll let the other candidates come in. Evelyn Early asked us a question for always. Can the candidates tell us one right or any right that trans people don't currently have now under the legislation, which obviously they need to make sure that they're protected as everyone else in the society? So Tasmina, again, if you can finish off your comments and then possibly answer that question.
Yeah, possibly. That question is probably for the other candidates more than myself. What I'm saying is the Gender Recognition Act and the debate around that needs an awful lot more conversation than it's currently had. That's why it was put to the side, which again isn't a good thing, because these things should be discussed and a resolution should be achieved. But as it currently stands, the Equality Act should provide, if properly rolled out, protections for everybody in law, so that nobody feels that their spaces are being taken from them and nobody feels threatened in any sense. Now, in this debate, and I understand we have to have a resolution, and I proposed how that should be done via Citizens' Assembly, where we hear from everybody, because everybody's rights matter to me. But during the debate so far, fundamentally, there's been a failure on an epic scale to listen to the voices of women. And when women dare to express an opinion, they are silenced or threatened. This is real, it's not made up. These are threats that we receive for expressing an opinion, and that is not on. We have a right to preserve our single-sex spaces, amongst all other things. We have a right to use our own toilets. We have a right, when our daughters have their first periods, to be the only females in that toilet. These things are important to us. In saying that, clearly reform is necessary. But in looking at that, we must make sure that no voices are silenced at the expense of others. So let's move forward with the Citizens' Assembly and allow everybody to speak without fear nor favour, and advance this hugely important discussion to so many people.
Thanks, Tasmina. And Gillian, over to you.
So obviously there are two sides to the GRA debate, and they are very clearly, all you have to do is spend half an hour on Twitter to see some of the absolute awfulness that has come through this. At the moment, trans people don't have the right to statutory self-declaration. They don't have the right to be seen as who they are. They absolutely deserve that. Why don't they? We all have a right to be who we are, so why don't they? That's one right I would love them to have. I think some of Tasmina's comments, considering some of the awfulness that came out of some of the tweets that came out of their women's conference, and the comments against Stonewall and those sorts of things were just awful. Absolutely incredible that you can sit here and say that you stand for all people's rights when you were happy to attend an event that comments like that were made. Unreal. So we will stand with the LGBT community always, for their rights, for everybody's rights.
Thanks, Gillian. And Dinesh, over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, look, equality rights do need to be brought up to standard in this Parliament, and part of that is the GRA reform. To answer the question, I believe, because I'm not absolutely up to date or an expert on this field in particular, spending a lot of my time on racial equalities as a person of Asian heritage, and being an Asian heterosexual man, not having skin in this particular game. I need to keep my ears open to both sides of the debate and make sure all groups are consulted as we go ahead. But from what I understand, the access to self-identification or having that put down in writing sooner is something that the trans communities are wanting access to sooner, and with less red tape. But as I said, we do need to take people along with us, and if elected to Parliament, that is something that I'll be ensuring happens, to make sure that the small minorities on either extreme of the argument are not the ones that overshadow the argument for the vast majority of people in the middle, that are really just trying to make Scotland a fairer place and want that to be the case for themselves and for others, because I honestly believe that for the vast majority of people, that is what people want for Scotland.
Thanks, Dinesh. And Tasmina, I see you had your hand up. Are you wanting to come back in on them comments?
Yeah, 2 points. So in relation to Danish, well, the Greens and MSP have been in the Scottish Parliament and have failed to resolve this issue. And you've had the opportunity to do so. We're merely suggesting a way forward for everybody. Gillian,
I haven't been in the Scottish Parliament.
Beg your pardon?
I haven't been elected to Parliament.
I'm talking about the parties. I'm just saying Alba, a party not currently in the Scottish Parliament, has a way forward. I'm simply just asserting that we've suggested a Citizens' Assembly. Gillian, if I may, and it may well be that that you've been reading reports in the press that are inaccurate, so I'm not going to suggest that you're being deliberately misleading, but I would like to set the record straight. That wasn't an event I attended, it was an event I organised. It was Alpa's Women's Conference, a women's only safe space event where women should be allowed in any normal place to have a discussion about things that concern them. The comments you referred to that were misreported in the press were misreported, you should let me finish, were misreported because somebody tweeted out of the event a misrepresentation of what was said, deleted that tweet because it was a misrepresentation of what was said, but the press reported on it anyway. Nobody asked Margaret Lynch what was said. Nobody was at that conference. No press were at that conference. Nobody was there. I was there. Margaret Lynch was accused of saying a whole host of despicable things that she would never say, has been campaigning for equality and for rights for the LGBT community when some of us weren't even around, when it was not fashionable to do so, not safe to do so. So I take great offence at anyone suggesting that she has anything anti-LGBTQ rights in her body at all. She was simply talking about an international pledge that included some signatories and why that should be something of concern when we investigate, when we sign up to something, what all of that actually means. There were no accusations made about any institution whatsoever. And we've made it very clear that we support all of the excellent institutions and organisations that have been doing work that I've worked with as an MP in our LGBTQ plus communities for a very, very long time indeed. And I should also add that every single newspaper, from the Daily Record to the Herald to the Scotsman, have offered Margaret the right to reply to correct the record, which she has done. So people should stop looking to the past and the misrepresentations and look at the truth, because only when we have the truth can we advance the debate. That is where we are.
Thanks, Tasmina. Gillian, do you want to come back on any of them comments?
I don't think it would bring anything helpful, in all honesty.
Okay, thanks for that, guys. Okay, so moving on to this slightly different tone, although probably back in the track from a Yes East Kilbride perspective. It's submitted by, now it says his name is Joe Soap, but you know, that's also more famous than my name, so I don't know if that's real or not. So questions also for all three candidates is, in the event of the UK government refusing another Section 30 order, what is the route to independence? And again, Dinesh, if we can start with you, please.
So I think now we are now past seeking the Section 30 order and being told no. I believe in this election, should we return a SNP majority government, I think it would be undisputable that the Scottish people have voted for an independence referendum, because that's our central policy. I believe even in the twisted world of Westminster and Downing Street, that would be an absolute hallmark of what the Scottish people want for their future. Not only that, it would be a legal, domestic and internationally recognised mark of legitimacy for our government to move towards that independence referendum. And I think at that point it would be, in the words, to borrow a phrase, beyond consent in terms of the Constitution. And I think we would then need to just march on and move forward ahead with independence, an independence referendum, because in my view, and the view of very many people sitting in this room right now, in this virtual room right now, would be a clear determination and delegation and a demonstration of what the Scottish people want. And I don't think anyone could ever argue with that. Now, if we split off into other groups, other parties, we lose that international mark of legitimacy that is a majority at government. We lose that stamp, that hallmark of legitimacy as a government, as a majority government, that Boris Johnson, by the way, has at the minute, through his lies and deceit and campaign of nonsense and broken promises. He's managed to do that. We are trying to do that in a positive way through governance, through credibility, with Nicola Sturgeon at the leadership, and show that we can govern for Scotland, for the people of Scotland, and bring about a fairer, more prosperous Scotland, and at the same time move towards independence, and that this is how we want Scotland to look like after independence. We can only do that with a majority SNP government. We brought the referendum when we had a majority SNP government, then we lost it due to votes on the list. And as it stands, we need, the SNP need a few percentage points, a handful of percentage points on the list to get list MSPs. It's not a lot of votes over and above. It's not the case that you get none. It's because we lose out on 3, 4, 5, 6, 7% to other smaller groups, and in a large part to the Greens, frankly, on the list side. And if that was in the SNP, we would then return a majority, which is how we got a majority last time, and we delivered the referendum. So this time around, if we can stick with the plan, both votes SNP across the board, right across Scotland, quite simply that would return a majority SNP government and move straight away forward into independence referendum.
So Gillian, over to you. What is the plan for the Greens should the boys done at Westminster refuse the Section 30 order this time around?
So I think that's subject to legal challenge if they do. It's clearly the will of the Scottish people that's what we want. We've returned a pro-independence majority last time, and I have absolutely no doubt there will be a pro-independence majority this time round. What the makeup will be, I'm hoping it's slightly different to Danish, obviously. We need a diverse number of independent supporting voices in there, and we were very close to getting a Green MSP in Central Scotland the last time round. I would obviously absolutely love it to be me this time round, and we need a slightly smaller number of percentage points to get me in versus the SNP. So the difference on the list could be myself or another Conservative MSP, and I think if I know most independent supporting people, I think they would quite like an independence supporting MSP rather than another Conservative in there. So that'll be my pitch against Danish's just then.
Thanks, Gillian. And so, Tasmina, again, you know, if we don't get the Section 30 order from Westminster, when we just try again another day, or how does Alba see that?
Well, first of all, I should say that there are 3 very strong horses on this game. I wouldn't be just saying this is just between the SNP and the Greens, because that's fundamentally unfair and the electorate has not yet spoken. So we'll leave it to the voters to decide who the list MSPs might be. To pick up on Danish's point, Danish, you know, it's like the idea that Boris Johnson's going to wake up on May the 7th or 8th, 9th, 10th, once we have all the counting because of COVID restrictions, and decide all of a sudden that the SNP has got more seats than last time, therefore I simply must agree, is for the birds. That's not going to happen. That's not realistic. What's going to fundamentally change that's going to make him change his mind? You have to recast what that parliament looks like. There must be something fundamentally different. I mean, you're shaking your head, Danish, but your suggestion is that Boris is going to say yes.
That was my suggestion. In fact, I said that he would not say yes and that we would need to move forward to legal proceedings. So that's actually what I said, Tasmina.
Okay, so what would those legal proceedings look like? What do you mean?
Meaning that we couldn't be legally held back from holding a referendum because we had a majority, so that they would need to then challenge us in court for that, because as a majority government, we can move ahead with that as a pejorative, as our prerogative in government, as a majority government. That's what my suggestion is. So
indeed, that is something that obviously...
not waiting for Boris Johnson, as you were suggesting.
I understand. Thank you for that clarification. Apologies if I misunderstood you. Along with that, of course, more action needs to be taken, because there was a case, people will know, by Martin Keatings in the Court of Session in relation to asserting the people's right to referendum. What was the SNP's position on supporting that, Danish?
So it is me, I didn't catch what you said, but I don't know if we're taking questions straight across to candidates, but I'm happy to engage with you.
Sorry, apologies, Danish, just to clarify on that, yes. So the second phase of the event, we're open if any candidates want to ask any other candidates, certainly they can, as long as also we will be respectful at all times, of course. Gary,
yeah, if Tasmina can repeat that and I can come back to her. What did you say?
Apologies, Danish. I was talking about the case, the current case that's ongoing. There's been a judgment, there's an appeal into Court of Session about the people's right to a referendum. I'm just asking what the SNP's policy has been in support of that legal action, which seems to be what you're suggesting you would be supportive of if it was SNP-led. but there is already action being raised.
So I personally would support us to take legal action to bring about the will of the Scottish people. I mean, personally speaking, I think that eventually that may be the route that we need to take to get out of the union.
I just think you'll find realistically that that's not the case on the ground in terms of the court case that's been running so far. But just to complete my point, and thank you so much, Danish, for it's very kind of you to answer my direct question there. Along with, of course, requests for Section 30 orders and legal actions if necessary, we suggest the institution of an independence commission, which would report to a special committee of the Scottish Parliament and a convention of all parliamentarians. We think that you need to draw the independent supporting parliamentarians from Westminster, as well as the Scottish Parliament, to draw together, a meeting of minds to see how we advance the cause in terms of real positive action to take things forward. So there's a variety of things that we can do, and all of the work that needs to be happening at the same time is work on what an independent Scotland should look like. Because there has been suggestions, you'll both be aware that Boris might throw a snap referendum at us, and we have to be ready. He's going to only make that suggestion if he thinks we're not ready, and he might win it. We need to make sure that we've got all bases covered, and if he was to do that, we'd be ready to win the argument and win the day for the people of Scotland.
Thanks, Tasmina. Gillian, do you want to add to that? No? Okay, perfect. So listen, the next question, and again, apologies, Dinesh, they seem to be kind of directed mostly in your direction. So there's a few questions coming in really asking of why is it so important for the SNP to gain a majority at this election? For example, there's a whole host of other countries that operate on a proportional representation system, with sometimes in excess of 10 separate parties that all have a similar viewpoint, although they certainly don't agree on everything. So what's different for the Scottish election from an SNP perspective? Apologies, Dinesh, that was for yourself.
Oh, yeah, no, thanks, Paul. So as I mentioned, I think the hallmark of a government in terms of how it can operate, how freely it can operate, and how easily it can operate as a government is based on whether it has a majority or not. Now, we've liaised a lot with the Greens on this part because obviously they're pro-independence, which shows that we are open to working with other independents, supporting MSPs that are currently in the Scottish Parliament. Now, tomorrow, should that change, decisions will need to be made surrounding that. My support for the SNP is obviously unwavering, and my suggestion for and my call for both votes SNP is because at the last election, had everyone who voted SNP on the constituency list voted for the SNP on the regional list, we would have had an SNP majority, and we could not have been denied the ability or the mandate to actually move forward for an independence referendum. Nevertheless, we still actually started proceedings to put together legislation for an independence referendum before coronavirus hit. In fact, we've been accused of having our eye off the ball by the Tories by doing so, but we had to put that aside for COVID. I don't think anyone could have said that we did the wrong thing there. So whereas moving out now at the other end of COVID now, I think it's only right that we move towards independence and an independence referendum. The reason why I keep coming back to the majority for an SNP majority is that that's what allowed us to hold a referendum first time round. And so if we want to do that again, that's our easiest and best and strongest hand to play, is to have an SNP majority. Obviously, any other MSPs that support independence within the Parliament would back us and be a part of that discussion. But the main cohort with that and the driving force of that has been and will continue to be the SNP should the Scottish people re-elect us to Parliament.
Dinesh and Gillian, Tasmina, do you want to come in on the comments at all? Appreciate that we're directed out, obviously at the SNP, but if you've got anything you wish to add? No? Okay, thank you.
I didn't know if Gillian was going to go first. Sorry, Paul.
Oh, apologies, yep.
No, sorry, I was giving Gillian time. Sorry, apologies, Gillian. Just to simply say on Danish's point that it would do the cause a lot of good, the cause of independence, which is greater than any political party and any one of us as individuals. A lot of good if we would stop suggesting that it was the preserve of one political party. The SNP getting a majority is not the only way to secure an independence referendum. It's a majority of independents supporting MSPs. And the simple question that I pose to just yourself, Danish, is in 2016, 129,082 people voted SNP on the list in the Central Scotland region and delivered 0 MSPs. That does not advance the cause of Scottish independence. It doesn't advance the cause of the arguments we need to make against a hostile Tory government. That is why I'm asking people to use their votes to ensure we have a supermajority of pro-independence supporting MSPs and not waste their votes this time around.
Bring you back in, Dinesh.
Yeah, no, I didn't suggest. Once again, I'm not sure what the speaker is responding to with what I said. I didn't want to suggest that was my preserve or that was the preserve of the SNP. But one thing is very true, that we are speaking about independence today because of the SNP. We're speaking about independence today as a core part of the conversation in the UK, nationally and in Scotland, because the SNP, because the SNP's policies, and because the SNP's governance. It's not only ours, but it is because the SNP's parties and our track record and our leadership and our credible leadership that we are here today talking about this as a political reality, not as a political fantasy anymore. And a lot of people's work has gone into that. A lot of people that are still part of the SNP, and a lot of people that may have moved on to other parties. But as the SNP, as I said, and this is what I said, are the main cohort of that, or the driving force behind that in Parliament, because we are the main parliamentary group that supports the SNP, that supports our independence. So therefore, it is, once again, and I hate to keep saying it, it's just a fact of the matter, the arithmetic at Parliament is such that the SNP are the main independent supporting group. So that's what I was saying. I wasn't one suggesting that's preserved of any single person's. It's certainly a larger cause than myself, or it is the Scottish people's, in effect. Coming on to the list numbers, I mean, we see this on Alpa's stuff all over Twitter. This many votes and this many MSPs were delivered. It's a quirk of the system that we know of. But the fact of the matter is, recognition internationally and domestically will only be achieved by the SNP having a majority. Having a group of it, or sorry, I muted myself there. We already have an independent supporting majority. So if we didn't have the Greens supporting us and giving us a majority, Alpa's tagline would be, well, we need an independence majority. Because we have a majority, they have to say, oh, well, we need an independent supermajority. If we have that, we need a super majority. Where does it end? The word supermajority doesn't have any legislative implications in Scotland. In the US and our American cousins, they have supermajorities for certain levels of governance. We don't have that in the same way in Scotland. And it's a clever bit of political engineering for a tagline. But the fact of the matter is, under Nicola Sturgeon's leadership, under our governance, we have today able to talk about this as a political reality, and it's within our grasp. And there's a few small percentage points that the SNP need over and above what we had before, as opposed to coming up from way up behind, such as Alba will need to do.
Thanks, Dinesh. Just before I bring you in, Tasmina, I'm conscious that I've left Gillian hanging again. If you want to come in on this, Gillian.
Yes, please. So I wanted to pick up on one of the things that Danish said and sort of counter it a little bit. I think an SNP majority would probably, with the experience of Boris Johnson we've had, probably would still be ignored by the Conservative government at Westminster. I think showing that we have diverse voices within the Parliament and not allowing Boris Johnson to boil it down to being him versus the SNP, I think is something that is really important when we're talking about looking for another referendum. And I think that's why I said in my opening remarks, this Hustings should not be about how to out independence each other. You have to live with whoever you elect for the next 5 years. Judge our policies. We are all committed to independence, but judge our policies. That's why I spent most of my opening remarks talking about all our other policies, as well as independence. We're there, we're with you. We support independence. We will do what it takes to get a referendum. But here's everything else we want to do as well to make Scotland a nicer place. So, yeah, judge us on our manifesto, judge us on the day job, and we will absolutely be pushing 100% with you to get an independence referendum as soon as possible, whatever comes of this election.
Thanks, Gillian. And Tasmina, I'll bring you back in.
Thanks very much, Paul. I think Danish said at the start of his answer there that it's very important for international recognition. I think that's what you said, Danish. Please correct me if I'm wrong, for there to be an SNP majority. Is that what you said?
I said the hallmark of legitimacy domestically and internationally would be a majority government.
SNP majority government. So
a majority government is the hallmark of legitimacy
government,
domestically and internationally. I didn't mention SNP there.
Right, so a majority government of which colour then? What would the majority government, what do you mean by that then? Which party?
A majority government
of independent supporting MSPs?
So internationally, the hallmark of legitimacy for any government is that it's a majority.
An SNP majority. The point I'm trying to make, Danish, where I'm trying to get to here is, I think it's dangerous to suggest to an international community that only if there's an SNP majority would the quest for independence be valid, or our entitlement to be granted that be valid. It should be enough in a democracy that there are sufficiency of pro-independent supporting MSPs for it to have that international recognition, not just one party. The other point I wanted to make in relation to the work of the SNP, Danish, and I agree with you entirely, we all stand, certainly those who've been members of the SNP, on the shoulders of giants of this movement who've been working for a long, long time to bring the party to where it is today, to be a party of government that the people of Scotland trust to govern their country. And that is why we are advocating that everybody, all of our supporters, vote to SNP in the constituencies to re-elect Nicola Sturgeon as First Minister. That is our position and our policy and what we're encouraging people to do. And I should add that in terms of some of the information that we're receiving back, people who weren't going to vote at all, which is an issue for all of us in this election because they felt disenfranchised or disenchanted, are now being encouraged to do so because we're encouraging people to do so by demonstrating how important it is that they use their votes wisely. In terms of challenging the SNP, Alba's not doing that. The Greens are doing that. The Greens are challenging the number of seats the SNP will win on the constituencies by challenging the SNP in 12 seats. So let's be fair. If it's okay for the Greens to challenge the SNP in constituency seats where the SNP needs to win to have a majority SNP government, then surely it's fair that us pro-independent supporting list candidates get the opportunity to fight on the list and the opportunity for our colleagues to say to us that if we are elected, not that they won't talk to us or won't speak to us, that's not in the national interest. What's in the national interest is to work with everybody. And one final point, Gillian, on the Green Manifesto, and I agree with, and as I say, a party highly respect is something that we say indeed in our own manifesto, a lot of your work. But I can, if I may, maybe you can provide clarification, just take slight issue with what your co-convener said on the BBC a weekend ago on the Sunday show, where she mentioned that she was also seeking the votes of unionists in terms of policies that the Greens have for dealing with the climate emergency. But my question then is, if Greens are elected and unionists form part of those votes, that is what she said, and Greens and the Greens have votes from the unionists, how then could they consider that a mandate for independence?
Gillian, do you want to come back in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is part of the problem. Danish said earlier on, and I totally agree with him, there are no voters and current unionist voters that we have to take with us. We have to convince them of the cause for independence. And if they come on board with us, if they decide to vote for us for our climate policies or whatever, if we can bring them along with the Yes movement, does that not benefit all of us? Does that not benefit the Yes movement widely? We are a pro-independence party. It was voted for by our conference. We will continue to be a pro-independence party, no matter who votes for us.
But Gillian, that's what I'm asking. I'm asking if people vote for you. This is not an independence referendum vote. This is a vote for parliamentary parties. If unionists who voted for you then say, but I didn't mean to vote for it to be a mandate for independence, and then challenge that, what then? Perhaps Lorna misspoke, and that's not the policy. Perhaps it is the policy that you're you anticipate that people vote for a pro-independence manifesto. But it was a point she made, not the point that I'm making.
No, it's a pro-independence manifesto. You can agree with parts of parties' policies and not parts of parties' policies and still vote for them. This is not an independence referendum, as you said. It's a political election. We are still a pro-independence party and everybody knows that. This comes back to the trying to out-independence each other. It doesn't work. It's just point scoring. And I'm yet to actually hear any points from your manifesto on health, on education, on anything else that the people of Scotland can actually get behind for the rest of the 5 years outside of the independence referendum.
I'm not talking about out-independencing each other. I'm simply asking for a point of clarification, that knowing how we've all been in the pro-independence campaign together, knowing how things are played against us when they're raised, what a Tory who voted for Green policy who says, well, I voted for Greens because I like their policy and independence because Lorna Slater told me that wasn't a vote for independence. And then you use that vote as a mandate for independence in the Parliament by the way you vote. So it's just a simple question about, how you answer that question.
I already have answered your question twice over now.
And in terms of our manifesto, it's brimming full of lots of policies on health, education, climate change, the lot, all sorts of things, because as you rightly say, this is not just about independence, this is election about advancing the cause of the people of Scotland who need help and policies from children right up to waspy women. And our manifesto is full of ways to do that.
What are your top three?
Apologies, guys, just we're conscious of time. I hate to cut in because it's also great content there. Dinesh, if you can just, I know you had your hand up for a while, if you want to come in on this briefly, because we need to move on.
Just to comment on a couple of points that were made. I've repeated it before, but Tasmina's picked up on it again, so I suppose I'll just rebut them again in the spirit of good debate. I didn't suggest anyone to exclude anyone from the democratic process. In fact, everyone is entitled to stand, and we have a very long list of parties that are standing. My suggestion and what I was offering to the viewers was the view of people that study the Scottish electorate and the Scottish voter, who know and have mentioned multiple times that the Scottish voters are very discerning and that they tend to distrust and tend to see them as opportunistic pop-up parties, and to say that we are giving free rein to the SNP on the constituency side is might be seen as something quite easy to give away, given that it'd be difficult for most parties to challenge the sitting government and challenge the party of the day and the government of the day in most seats. I know the Greens are doing so, but again, the Greens are much more established and have a place in the consciousness of the Scottish voter in a way that maybe other pop-up parties or other new parties don't. So it wasn't that anyone should be excluded. What I was saying was that the Scottish voter may exclude them when it comes to voting and ballot day, because we're hoping that people both vote SNP for a majority government, for the SNP, for independence, and for leadership under Nicola Sturgeon, who has shown every single day since the start of the pandemic and every single day before that strong leadership of what it looks like and what strong governance looks like. And we've seen a lot of commendations of that from all sides, even today, on our governance. And that is the key thing for yes voters, for no voters, and for everyone in the middle. That will show strong governance. That is the way that we're going to show what Scotland looks like after independence. It's not an event. It is a way of life and living for our country as we move ahead. And that's why, speaking about all aspects of policy, on our healthcare, upping that by 25%, on getting 100,000 new homes, on the National Care Service, on our promises to rural communities and how to improve that for fishing, for reforming peatland, for helping achieve green targets sooner than anywhere else in the UK, for continuing free tuition in Scotland as long as the Scottish government is an SNP government. All of these things are things that the SNP can continue to reform, continue to make Scotland the best place in the UK to live and the best place in the world to live because of our governance. And it's a political decision. It's not a political reality when it comes to cutting things from those that are worse off in our communities that the Tories would have you believe. And these are political decisions, and we can find the money by working smarter And a key part of that is our progressive tax system, which Nicola Sturgeon has now said would be frozen for the term of the Parliament. So no increase on income tax bands or income tax application over the next 5 years. So that's another thing for our manifesto.
Thanks, Dinesh, and apologies if anyone wants to come back in on that, because also we're sharply running out of time. Just a final question of the night before we have kind of sum up comments from each of the candidates is, and one I can relate to personally is, you as a candidate, what would you personally do to support the yes groups, the grassroots yes groups, who represented the majority of the yes and the voting public? So what will you personally do to support these should you be elected going forward? And Gillian, we'll start with you, please.
So these yes groups need, well, firstly, they know best what they need. So very much, I would make it my priority to go and speak to them and hear from them what they need from me, what they need from the party, what they need from the wider movement to be able to help and establish them. I know some have had some problems maybe keeping going and with office bearers and things like that over recent times. So recruiting new people to it as well. We need to build that yes momentum. So bringing new people to grassroots yes movements is a must from across the political spectrum. We need to convert more people to yes, and bring, as we've said several times tonight, bring them with us, bring them into the progressive Scotland that we want to see. But I will absolutely be there if anybody needs a speaker or someone to be able to help out with various things. There's a pair of hands and an endless amount of chat if anybody needs anything like that. But I will make it my priority to get round all the grassroots yes movements in the region and hear from them what they need and act upon that.
Thanks, Gillian. And Dinesh, over to you. What will you do to assure you can support the yes movements going forward should you be elected?
So if I'm elected, I will be a representative for everyone across the board. And that includes everyone within the yes movement, includes everyone within the SNP, obviously, and includes anyone who lives in the Central Scotland region. Now, to converse on why Scotland should be independent for those that aren't currently convinced yet, for those that maybe want to discuss, the broader or the finer points on reasons why they don't quite support the SNP yet. I'm open to having a conversation. So find me on Twitter or on my Facebook. My name is just there on my screen, which I'm sure you'll be able to see. And you can find me and we can converse on those issues. But I'm open to having the conversations. And locally in Cumbernauld, I'm friendly with a number of the yes movement. And those that maybe don't always attend the SNP meetings as well. So, I am linked in here as well.
Thanks, Dinesh. And Tasmina? Thanks, Paul. Well, I would say that a lot of our members, supporters, organisers, volunteers are members of that yes movement, and they've come to us because they felt that they haven't been listened to and their cause hasn't been advanced. What I would say is that all pro-independent supporting parties should be lending their ear, as we are now doing via this political entity of Alba, to the yes movement, because when the politics was being carried on with post-2014, which was necessary, I think, and I was taken off the ball in terms of the national movement itself. But thanks to their vigour, their spirit and their determination, the marching continued, the meetings continued, the leafleting continued, the street stalls continued. And much of that happened without the support of politicians, without politicians turning up to speak at their events. And therefore they must be supported. And the same also applies for those bloggers who write for the yes movement as well, presenting, in the majority of cases, a positive case for independence. All of these groups, all of these writers, all these people, these bloggers, these marchers must be supported. And I do hope that they find in Alba a home. And I should, Danish, you made the point about being a pop-up party. I'm not quite sure what your definition of that is. But a party that has double the number of MPs in Labour, more members than the Liberal Democrats, 5,000, and at least 20 councillors, it's not a pop-up party, nor are we going away. And the very fact that we still haven't got independence, or a manner in which to achieve it by 2021, will determine the fact that we are here to stay because we require to be so.
Thanks, Tasmina. And just to add to that, obviously, thanks for the question coming in. But each of the candidates also took time here to join us tonight, after a very hectic schedule of campaigning. So we can certainly vouch that they were very approachable for us. And I'd thank again for everyone that's took the time on that. So sadly, we're out of time for what's been a really excellent night, some great discussions. And again, thanks everyone for contacting us. We're just going to finalise tonight with a final kind of roundup. So your final speech, how do you want to get people to vote for you on your regional vote in the upcoming election? And this time we'll start with Gillian, please, and we'll go for, say, a minute tops if we can do this. So no pressure. Thanks, Gillian.
No, thankfully I can talk at 100 miles an hour. So if you want a progressive, young, disabled MSP who is going to be there fighting for independence as well as all the other things we want to see in a progressive, new, shiny independent Scotland, then I would very much appreciate your list vote. I ran through a whistle-stop tour of our manifesto at the start, and I would really encourage you all to read it. I am on Twitter and Facebook if anyone wants to get in touch afterwards. And yes, East Kilbride has my email address if any members want to get in touch with me that way. So yes, please make sure you use your vote first of all, and please use it for the Scottish Greens on the list.
Thanks, Gillian, and thanks for keeping it within time. Dinesh, over to you. Closing comments, please.
Thanks, Paul. So I suppose I was doing a similar form. So if you want an SNP representative and also to ensure that we get an SNP majority at the Scottish Parliament, which is going to bring forward, if re-elected, a laptop or tablet for every school child, free school meals for lunches and breakfasts, 100,000 more homes, 70% of those alone, which will be for social rent, continuing to have free tuition and widening that across the board, and a record investment in our colleges, the National Care Service, and a whole host of other things that I've mentioned already, then you need to vote both votes SNP. We won't be taking it for granted. We can't take it for granted that the SNP is going to get re-elected with a majority. So the list vote needs to go to the SNP to make sure that there's no upsets on the day. With regards to each of my opponents that were speaking about, talking about independence, that can only be possible if the SNP are already there holding the fort and moving things forward, and the conversation and the governance around that. Neither of the parties that are here today can do that on their own. It's the SNP that's delivered for that and made this a political reality on the Scottish sphere, in the Scottish consciousness, and in the UK, a conversation that has reached all the way to 10 Downing Street. He knows now that this is a political reality and it's coming, and his day of reckoning is coming when we hold that independence referendum and vote ourselves out of this union and out into the big world, and we join it.
Thanks, Dinesh. And last but not least, Tasmina, if you can give us your closing statement. Thank you. Oh, you appear to still be on mute.
Sorry, I'm at my best when I'm on mute. Thank you so much. Just to say thank you to Gillian and Danish, and also thank you to Yes East Kilbride. I mean, by definition, because this is very much in the frame of Yes East Kilbride event, independence, of course, will always be top of the agenda. It's what unites us all. I would simply say this is a really important election. I know everybody says that about every election, but it's important because we're running out of time to make a difference to the lives and livelihoods of people who need us to take action now. That action can only be done and our communities best served by securing independence for Scotland as quickly as we possibly can. We have a really interesting manifesto that offers free sport for all youngsters under the age of 18, free school meals across the board, served by our Scottish chefs using Scottish produce, renewable energy opportunities, all sorts of things, house building initiatives. All of that is in there and more. But fundamentally, I come back to the most important point that brings us all together, and that is independence. The time for independence is now more than it has ever been, because the pandemic and the impacts of Brexit have left people who we know and love and those who we care about in our communities in positions of great distress, suffering poverty and inequality. Our businesses suffering greatly as a result of the restrictions that Brexit has placed them under. So it's really important that people vote, they come out and vote in these elections. And if they want someone who's going to stand up every single day, passionately, believing firmly and strongly that independence is the best way forward, and nudging what I anticipate will be an SNP government led by Nicola Sturgeon, as well as doing all of the great work that they will do in government in the direction of achieving that independence, I would ask you to vote for the Alba party and vote for us on the Central Region on the list on the 6th of May in just 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Thanks, Tasmina. And unfortunately, as I say, we're out of time, and that brings us to the end of the evening. And as we said it from the start, this election has been described as being important in the history of our parliament since it reconvened in 1999. So you've heard from each of our candidates. The choice is down to you. Of course, from a Yes East Kilbride perspective, we're all parties and none. We're not telling you to vote any of the candidates here or indeed the parties there. We're asking you to make the informed choice by making sure you've got the knowledge you need to make that decision, because it's a massive decision, not just for us, but for the next generation and the generation after that. We've got a chance to make a real difference in the country. Despite some of the points that were argued tonight, also the key thing here is about making a better life for people in our country, because whether it's ourselves, we're certainly not far away from people who are in dire need of our help and the chance of a better future. So thanks again for all our candidates. Thanks to Dinesh, Tasmina and Gillian for taking time to join us. And I hope everyone watching at home had the help they need to make that decision. And thanks for all the questions that came in. And certainly just the last piece as a shameless plug, obviously, if you're looking to get involved in the campaign, because we need it, every one of you will be the change. Contact Yes East Kilbride if you want to join us directly, and more importantly, join your local Yes group and certainly get in contact with us for any other details and information on that. Each of the candidates are also approachable, who are working flat out just now to get as much of your votes as they possibly can. So, of course, use them. That's what they're there for. So thanks, everyone. Stay safe and wish you a good night. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Paul. Thanks to Yes East Kilbride.
Thank you.
Thanks.